Welcome, everyone. We are here today to talk about the many new powers, power sets, and power related things that are in the X-Men expansion. I'm joined, of course, by Billy Mickel.
Hello.
Yeah, and we're going to just take it through. We're going to start with 4 brand new full power sets. We've got 3 older power sets that have gotten new powers. That's telepathy, power control, and teleportation. We've got 2 brand new elements to talk about, which augment the existing elemental powers. And we've got 1 clarification on an old power set that we'll wrap up with. But yeah, let's start off talking about the new power sets, and we'll start with healing. Healing, I think for me, Billy, I don't know about you, but that was like the one power set that I was 100% sure we were going to get in the new book. Because you just think about the mutants that they haven't been able to create
Yeah,
profiles for. I was like, it's got to be there.
yeah. When you see it on any of the forums, that's something that people were clamoring for.
Yeah.
Like, how do you make this character? I mean, the whole Krakoan era, whether you like it or not, dealt a lot with healing. So I mean, it had to be there.
Yeah.
It's one of those no brainers that you almost knew was coming.
Yeah. Obviously for Elixir. And we've even got, we've got like Healer from the Morlocks that obviously wasn't in the book, but is somebody
Yeah,
that's going to be easy to create now.
yeah.
So, yeah, I kind of like the way, and we'll throw this up on the screen as we talk, but I kind of like the way the power set is built, right? You've got the focus powers on one side and you've got the health related powers on the other, and each of them is kind of similar. So you've got Let's Go on one side and Never Surrender on the other, and each of them are pretty similar. And these are the ones that when you get down to 0, either health or focus, it kind of pops you back up and allows you to do your thing. Let's Go, it gets you back up to at least move. It says that you're mobile. But I think the reason that's really important is, assuming you were on the front lines taking damage, you can pop back up. And even though you can't use a standard or a reaction, you can still hustle back because that's what you're going to need to do to get some more health or focus back.
And I think another keynote to mention, and when we were looking at this, is your teleport power. So
Mm.
if you heal a teleporter, teleport one and teleport two, teleport blind, and teleport together are all movement actions. So if you're in a bind and your teleporter is the one that's down, if you heal him and you happen to be touching him as a team, he can teleport you all out of there together. He, she, whatever.
Right.
So that's key to remember that those are movement powers.
Yeah,
And
that's a big one. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think that works very well. I like the fact that the healing does have to be touched. If there's one stinker in this group, I would say for me, it's Cure All. It feels a little underpowered compared to the other ones, especially at that rank, right? So what Cure All does is it helps get rid of those conditions, whether it's ablaze or corroding, poison, paralyzed. It's kind of funny if you think about it. So it's a rank 4 ability, right? So
yeah,
that means it's costing you 15 focus. It would cost you 15 focus to heal somebody for 15 health, points of health. So it's almost like, yeah, why don't you roll around on fire for the next 3
yeah,
rounds? I'll just heal you later. Yeah, it just feels like maybe it's a little underpowered. I would almost see it as like maybe even like a rank 2
yeah.
ability. I don't know. How do you feel about that?
And you can use a standard, like a teammate can use an action to help you put you out of put you out, um, douse you with water to cure that, a blaze from acid or whatever. Anyway, it is a help action that you can do with no focus cost.
Hmm.
I mean, you do lose an action as a teammate to do it, but again, so it's kind of like as a power, you're like, it should be dialed back a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
So,
But, all in all, I think, having these powers somewhere in your party can really help sort of extend your adventuring day, kind of like a
yeah,
cleric does in D&D, right?
yes,
Um, and helps you be a little less reliant on karma. So actually, just thinking about it, having a healer in a villainous campaign would actually be even more
uh,
important. I never thought about
yeah.
that until just now. Yeah.
Well, and you know what? I'm sure if I thought long enough and not to extend any time talking about it, but I guarantee you, there's been at least a villain or two that they've had that aid that's their role. If I'm not mistaken, I mean, wasn't one of the Alkalites a healer? Maybe not, with Magneto, possibly. It's been a long time.
Yeah.
So,
But yeah, definitely would be fun to have somebody like that. Could certainly be a surprise if you're fighting a group of enemies and your party is not accustomed to having these characters bounce back so quickly from
yeah,
taking some damage.
exactly.
Okay, so let's move on to luck. As a big Domino fan, really, really happy they gave luck as much love as they did. I love Domino's build. All of these powers, I think, work really well. I think they scale well. If we were talking earlier about, using inspiration, the power as like a baseline, as something that doesn't cost any focus, but only lasts the one round. And then you look at all of these other abilities going from, say, like Jinx You to Evil Eye to Jinx You All, being able to last multiple rounds, being able to use concentration and maintain that, 5 points of focus per round, I think is just scales really nice because you can't maintain that forever. I mean, Domino's
Yeah,
already, really, really powerful.
yeah, and you've got to be careful. You've got to scale the stuff because, as we've mentioned before in other talks, that it can get out of hand, and it's got to have that balance. So the per round focus cost makes sense so that it doesn't get out of hand.
Yeah. Now, if you want to get a little out of hand,
Yeah,
I think building your character with a high focus, giving them the battle ready trait. If you're going to have a character that's using luck, you definitely want it. You're going to burn through your focus big time. And the other thing I really like this is I love the way, and I talked to CJ about this recently. If you haven't seen the CJ Cervantes interview that I did, but I really love the way this power or these powers play with other powers that have maybe some sort of negative to using them. So headshot is one example. Headshot starts with trouble. And so you have to overcome that in some way if you have any hope of getting, unless you think you can roll Marvels twice in a row. But generally speaking, if you want to optimize your chances to get that fantastic success, you got to figure out a way to get rid of trouble. Somebody like Domino, who has charmed life and gets an automatic edge on every roll she makes, never takes or usually won't have trouble if all other things are equal.
yeah,
She won't have trouble using headshot. And the other power I like using this in conjunction with, which Domino also has, is sniping. Because sniping, you don't have trouble on it, but going from that regular success to the fantastic success means triple damage.
that's huge.
Yeah. So especially if you've gone through all of the, like we were talking earlier, it's hard to put yourself in a position to get that sniping shot off. You got to be 20 spaces away. So if you've done all that work, you've invested, you got to invest your movement action.
Yeah,
If you've done all that, well, you could be giving yourself a bonus with concentration. So it doesn't take an action that turn.
yeah,
So yeah, so there's plenty of things you can do that can optimize your chances for getting that fantastic success and the triple damage.
yeah, exactly. Because sniping's one, like you said, one of those things that you either got to luck into the right distance and situation because you got to be 20 spaces away at least, or you've got to set up that shot to your point. So you're investing a decent amount in that. And once you're into that position, you can't move. So again, with those powers and the fact that it's concentration, and if you've set it up already,
Hmm.
now you just enhanced your chances to really pulling off a good sniping shot.
Yeah. And maybe there's another, situation you need to just you really want to land that fantastic
Exactly.
success because of the special effect. You really need to knock somebody prone because they're running away. You really need to stun somebody to cover your retreat. You really need to, put some type of, um, you know, special effect on the enemy. The luck powers are just great to have in your back pocket. So you don't have to have a Domino character that's completely built or mostly built around luck. You can have a character that has just a little luck to nudge things in their favor.
Yeah, and to your point, think about any of those powers like elemental ricochet. If you don't like, you've invested that focus in it, and if you don't hit it with the fantastic success, then I mean, it's still going to do its damage, but
Mm.
you don't. You almost kind of lose that feel for, oh man, I didn't get there. Now, if you have the luck powers, you increase your chance of, okay, I'm going to ricochet and then get to that next one. And especially since it's concentration and last, you may even get to that next one. So it can pay huge dividends.
Yeah.
Chain strike comes to mind. Any of those that keep extending that next action, it can be huge
Oh
with the
my
luck power.
gosh. Yeah. You can put a few of them together. No doubt. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's exciting. I can't, like I've said before, I can't wait to play domino at a table. But yeah, let's move on to the third one, which is Sixth Sense. You look at a character like Destiny, obviously these powers are there to make a character like that feasible. You've got multiple ranks of precog and postcog.
Yep.
You've got things like intuition. I really like the intuition power, and my daughter just chose this power for her new character. I think this power is great for especially like a less experienced gamer, somebody that might not have the instincts that, folks like us who've been gaming for 70 years, or feels like it. Like we kind of know maybe which way an adventure is going. Maybe don't open that chest, or maybe don't go down that corridor, or maybe that statue is really a mimic or something like that.
Yeah.
We've got those instincts, right? We've been burned so many times. But a new player might just enjoy having that ability to kind of,
Yep.
hey, give me a little hint, which way should I go here?
Yeah. And it keeps in with, it doesn't mean like it doesn't get you out of theme either. So like
Mm.
sometimes you want that hint, but as the narrator, you don't have a real reason to give them that hint. Well, now you got the reason.
Right.
uh, and you'll want to like if they're like, hey, using their powers, like, okay, now you as a narrator don't feel guilty giving them that hint either, because it's like it's built in, it's part of their character, it's part of their power.
Right. And then you don't have to feel guilty if somebody asks for a hint and you say no, or you say,
No.
wait, do you have the intuition power? No. Oh, well, then I wouldn't
Yeah.
be following the rules if I gave you a hint. So you don't have to
Exactly.
feel guilty in that situation too.
Yep.
Awesome. And then, one important thing I think to keep in mind is if you're using these precog abilities or even the postcog ones, you probably want to have a chat with your narrator about how that might work, especially if you're going up the ranks and you're looking at a precog 4 and you're asking your narrator, well, what's going to happen a year from now? And your narrator's like, this was a one shot.
Yeah.
So obviously you don't want to build a character that um, your narrator maybe doesn't know how to take advantage of or isn't planning on that. Um,
You don't want to waste that power on a
yeah,
precog 4 if you're not even gonna, if it's not going to benefit you at all during the game.
right. And then if you are a narrator and like you've got to probably understand that if you do have a destiny in your campaign, it's not unreasonable for them to be looking weeks, months ahead. So you've got to maybe do a little homework
Yep.
sometimes and kind of have at least a plan in your back pocket for how things are going to go. And
Yep.
things don't have to be exactly the same way. Like we know that from the comics, Destiny always
Yep.
go, oh, it's a little cloudy. I'm not sure if this is really going to work that way. But
Yep.
definitely have that conversation with your narrator if you want to play a character like that, because it is going to require some extra work on the narrator side.
You as the narrator don't want to be caught in a situation where you're like, I don't know how to keep the game moving, I'm not sure what kind of information to give you. So to your point, if you have a couple notes already, then you've got a little something to go on. Because again, nothing stalls a game more than a narrator having to sit there and think, okay, how do I get through this, how do I move on to the next thing, and to make it flow and be part of the game, because you don't want it to sound really made up on the fly. Some people are
Right.
really good at that. Some people not so much. So
And one other thing about the precog, I think it would work really well for a villain, because you think about it, your NPCs, you can say a year ago is when they used this power, for this moment in this game right now, 1 year in the future. And they've been planning for a year for this moment. So that's a way of giving them all sorts of extra bonuses that might seem like unfair or impossible for your characters. And maybe that's part of the game, is to figure out how could this
how do
person
they know all this?
yeah, have known for that long. And then it's like, oh, all right, well, this guy can't beat me up, or like Destiny, right? Destiny can't, and she's got some martial abilities, but generally speaking, she's not going to kick the Juggernaut's ass. But
Yeah,
maybe she can put some things in play from 6 months, a year ago that are going to utterly destroy him because of
yeah,
the knowledge she has of the future.
exactly. I
Yeah.
think it worked well, very well for villains. Planning prep. It makes perfect sense for some of them.
Now, I know you were doing a build, just moving on to the next power to talk about involving cosmic awareness. Tell us a little bit about how that went.
Well, so I'd done a build before a long while back on Captain Marvel, who has cosmic awareness.
Mhm.
At the time, it wasn't a power, so I use ESP, I think, to kind of
Mhm.
simulate his cosmic awareness.
Mhm.
But now you've got the actual power. There is a prerequisite of microscopic awareness that you have to take before it.
Right.
And again, sometimes it depends on your builds and your narrator. If you're just building it as a character that the narrator's using, you can not necessarily have to go with that prerequisite. Just okay, it's cosmic awareness for this build. But yeah, obviously, if you have a character that you're narrating for, you want them to follow the prerequisites. First, when I was doing this, I was like, why should I take microscopic awareness
Right.
just to get to cosmic awareness? But if any of you guys are familiar, eventually Captain Marvel developed cancer and died. But if you read his storyline, he himself, with his cosmic awareness, figured out within his body that the cancer was growing. So then it made a little bit more sense. It's like, okay, I can justify picking the microscopic awareness on top of the cosmic awareness because he was able to sense the change in his DNA. So then
Right.
it makes a little bit more sense. So not to get too far out there, sometimes with the certain builds you may want to, skip or prereq. But again, I'd suggest that only for narrators as far as some of their villain builds possibly. But again, it made perfect sense really reading in and digging back in because it's been 25 plus years since I'd read the Captain Marvel novel that
Yeah.
I used to own a long time ago. But again, Captain Marvel, perfect. Now they got cosmic awareness. Who else? Even Silver Surfer had some cosmic
Surfer.
awareness.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if you wanted to like tweak a build that you'd done in the past, now that you got another power that's available that may not have been there before, and you had to tweak something, and maybe it makes more sense now.
Okay, now let's go to the translation powers, which, obviously these are there for Doug Ramsey, right? Like almost all of these are used only by Doug Ramsey. So a couple things I think to point out here. One, there's one power called understand sign language. Keep in mind, this isn't for the ASL Earth sign language, right? That is a language. You can take a tag for ASL and get that for free. This is meant to be, if you read the description, unknown sign language. So if you encounter an alien race that's using a sign language, there's a different power for that than if you encounter an alien race that's using body language or spoken language or written language. To me, that feels like a little too split up, like a little too fractured. It feels like maybe there's a way to get all of that into two powers rather than having to take four. For, let's face it, something that if you read Guardians of the Galaxy or watch the movies, everyone's got a universal translator, right?
Yep.
So you have this thing that everyone has, in a certain part of the Marvel universe that is taking like an entire build, an entire power set worth of things to put that into one character.
And again, of course, we're not discouraging if you want to build that type of character and you want to be the person that's challenged by that, then by all means, go for it and enjoy it, play it, role play it out, right?
Yeah. But one of the side effects is, this makes Doug Ramsey, because of the number of powers that are on that list, he's got to be a rank 3
Yeah.
character minimum. I think one, you could have made him a rank 2 if you
Yeah.
consolidated some of those, or you could have gone the Moira McTaggart route and given
Yep.
him a narrative power that just says he can translate all the things, period. keep him at a rank one. And for anyone who's read the relatively recent storyline X of Swords, Doug Ramsey is taken to the other world where he has to fight with a sword, and it's magic. It's Ilyana Rasputin's responsibility to kind of train him, and even she's like, "You're gonna die, like you're just
Yeah.
overmatched. Like you better hope we could figure a way out of this because if you have to fight any of these people, you're dead." So it's like very clear that he is not
Yeah.
the fighter, right? Except maybe in the at the times where he sort of merged with
With
Warlock and
Warlock.
become
Yeah.
Douglock, right? But other than that, he's such a liability in combat. Even having him as a rank three doesn't, to me, doesn't quite feel
Doesn't
right.
jive with what I think most people would put him at a rank 2 or rank 1, just personally. But to
Yeah,
your point, you've got to build him as a rank 3 to get all these in here for him.
right.
So
Yeah, but as we always say, there's no wrong build. Like this is one build, it's the
yep,
published build. There's no reason you can't create a rank one Doug Ramsey that has a narrative power, especially if you're using him as like an NPC.
NPC.
All
Yeah.
right. Like if you're a Doug Ramsey fan and you're dying, you're so happy that there's a Doug Ramsey build because you get to play him. Like
Yep.
before you go investing, 8 powers worth of translation abilities, ask your narrator, is there going to be any challenge in the game where this will be valuable? Like
Exactly.
always talk to your narrator. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that's it for the power. I mean, we didn't really we touched on the narrative uh, powers a little bit. I guess the only thing I'd say is I think they're there to prevent abuse of a
Use.
certain power set. Like I think you could absolutely abuse multiple man's powers, right? We know in the comics the stuff that he's able to do, create dupes, have them go off, go to school, learn new trades, become a spy, become a lawyer, become a doctor, and then get reabsorbed. And boom, you have all of those abilities without ranking up. And
Yep.
that's a game breaking concept. And you wouldn't want to say, well, we'll just make him rank six if he brings in enough traits and occupations
Yeah.
and whatever else he's absorbing. So I get that, but I think there are alternate builds, and I
Yeah.
know folks have them where you can, all right, let's knock the power down a little bit. We don't have to use every power he's got in the comics and still have a serviceable, maybe rank three or so build.
I think some people would get discouraged. They're like, some people would be looking to play multiple man, Jamie Madrox, and then when they find out, oh, he's got a narrative power, which by suggestion means that only a narrator should play because
Mhm.
of that. But to your point, there's ways that you can build that character out, but you're going to have to limit what you maybe you use mirror images and give each do, and maybe you limit how many he can make, even though yes, he can make a bunch.
Mhm.
I was talking with a community builder a little while back, and she mentioned maybe each time he gets hit, it's a rank 1 minion or henchman dupe that has significantly lower hit points. But again, you can work that in. So a lot of people were really looking forward to that. So
Mhm.
don't, not to discourage anybody, even though it's listed as narrative power. To your point, you can make a build that is a playable character, and to not let it get out of hand, sort of thing.
Well, I think that's it for the full power. So let's talk about the older power sets that got some new powers. So telepathy is one of them. Copy psyche is the new one. And really this is here for the Krakoan era, right? Where that was an essential part of the
Yeah.
resurrection protocols. I'm not sure if that's going to get used a lot outside of that. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, when you look back, we've discussed before, you and I, about when you read how it works. I mean, there's some people that could possibly take advantage of that, maybe even if it's limited to like how many psyches in them, like some type of mind transference thing. Um, I kind of harken back to like Doctor Doom had switched his mind with
Right.
Reed Richards. You could probably flavor or riff that power a little bit, even though You know what I mean? To do something along those lines,
Like put
because
it in
it
a
does.
machine or a piece of equipment, maybe that would be pretty cool.
Yeah,
Power slider, I think, is an interesting one, especially for, Exodus and Mojo are two examples that are in the book, and Mojo especially just feels like
yes.
so dead on with the media power slider.
And then of course, a lot of people will think of Gladiator when he comes to
Mhm.
mind. Confidence. His power is so dependent on his confidence. If his confidence wanes, he's not as strong. But again, he's a Superman-esque type character. But Power Slider would make sense if somebody decides to build Gladiator, which I think Perry Lee Rumble did build a
Mhm.
Gladiator. He may go back and retouch on that one now
Yeah,
because it's with the Power Slider available. So
yeah. And the first character we got with power slider isn't even in this book. She was in the Deadpool book, which
yeah,
is the
Lyra.
Lyra She-Hulk, and so she's got to kind of stay calm to be more effective. That's
Yeah,
especially a fun one to play through a short adventure. If you have played the Deadpool adventure, I'm sure we got a lot of people out there that have played it, and you have played Lyra, which is really good because she's the one person that comes to mind that can really, really hit hard in melee combat. Yeah, so if you've played Lyra in that, let us know how you thought about that power slider power. And then finally, we've got a number of swap abilities, swap items, swap places, power, status, that are all part of the teleportation power set. And if it feels a little weird that those would be in there, it's chiefly in service to the escapade character in the book to realize that character's power sets. I'm not aware of any other characters that might be using that established ones, but certainly it opens up, to create your own that could have some of those abilities.
yeah, and even though we pride ourselves on having a pretty extensive Marvel knowledge, but that does not mean that there's not somebody out there that I've forgotten about. You know, 30 plus 35 almost 40 years of collecting that I've done at some point. So
Yeah.
if you guys know of a character out there that maybe we've missed, feel free to mention it.
Yeah. And those are the only three power sets that got new or completely new power. So not a ton there, but hey, it's great because that just means there's more space for the new powers within the new power sets. However, we did get a boost to the elemental control power set. Now, the interesting thing is we've got these two completely new elements, but in our look at the book, there's only one character that takes advantage of that, and that's Toad.
Yep.
So it's great that they're in there, and I think people, especially, the poison condition is something that I know people have looked at and have house ruled that condition. But I'm sort of looking back a little bit and saying, well, uh, what are the types of characters that you could add this to? Because you think about it, you got your new book, you've got two new conditions in it, yet there's only one character in the game that can apply that condition. So I'm the kind of person that wants to go back and say, well, how can I tweak, older builds? And I know you had a bunch. The only one that I had thought of was an aim agent, taking a simple rank one aim agent and giving them a gun that instead of does, energy damage can do chemical or toxin damage just to get a little, have a little something different and unexpected come out of a rank one character could almost be a little surprising.
Yeah, a little more flavor. I
Yeah.
like to use the word flavor. Yeah, in our discussion, we kind of talked about like Craven the Hunter came to mind. Poison tip darts for toxin make perfect sense with Craven.
Yeah.
And if any of you guys remember the storyline, there was a time when he actually poisoned or put Spider-Man to sleep and buried him alive and took over his identity for a while just to prove that he was better than Spider-Man. So Craven, you could swap out either a power if you want, or even if you use it as a one-time use gadget, blow dart, whatever. You got to limit the use
Mhm.
if otherwise then it has to become a power. So you can put it as an iconic weapon, sort of thing. Another character that came to mind was Red Skull. And if anybody's familiar with him, I've seen in a comic book that I remember very specifically is, he has his little typical plastic, that long cigarette holder or whatever, and he kind of chomps down on it, and it blows his little dust of death. And
Yeah.
again, that could be the corrosive or chemical corrosive use. So again, kind of looking back at some other characters that could potentially use that. I know a few of our community builders have built Cyber, who's got poison claws. So again, just keeping in mind, thinking about characters that could potentially build, or existing characters that you can add that to.
Yeah. And I think another one you mentioned was just giving it to a hand ninja,
Oh yeah, yeah.
having a poison blade or
Yep.
even a blowgun or something like that.
Yep. Again, like to your point about just throwing a little bit of a different twist that you don't see in the build currently, and adding these new conditions would be kind of like a little different twist.
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea of taking a grenade, right? We have the flashbang grenade that applies conditions. Think about a grenade that just explodes with a toxin of some kind, or
Yeah.
some sort of acid that does some sort of corrosive damage, especially if it blasts a number of people. And now you've got a group of people with a condition that they're not familiar with. That sounds like a pretty good slash evil way to
Yeah.
introduce a brand new condition to your game. Really get people thinking about, what do I do now?
Yeah. And now the characters have to react to that, because if it's not characters that are hit and it's structures that are corroding, I mean, it adds just so many more elements, because we always think about in terms of the heroes, but this affects so many other things. Again,
Yeah.
from a narrator standpoint, when you're telling the tale and crafting that story, corrosive can do a lot of other things besides just damaging the characters themselves. It can damage structures. So now you got to, okay, how do we deal with this? It hits civilians, or whether it's a poisonous gas, using the toxin, it's poisonous gas. How do we help in this situation? Not got to think outside more than just exactly what it hurts the characters.
Before we move on to the next section, I've got some late breaking news regarding powers. If you're familiar with the work that GM Hooley has done for the game, you are aware that he's worked on some pretty amazing and free resources for the community. I've put a link to his site in the description. Highly recommend checking it out. Hooley has just finished updating his power cards to include not only all of the new powers we just discussed from the X-Men book, but also the new Dreamtime powers from the latest Tony's Workshop. Now, personally, I use his power cards in my home game. It's so much easier for my kids to look through a small deck of cards rather than passing now a couple of books around the table to find exactly the power they want to use. This is such a helpful resource. Thanks so much, Hooley. All right, now let's wrap up. And then I think we only have one other item, which is a clarification on an old power set, the Resize power set.
If you look at the multipliers, when you resize, when you get below little, you're supposed to apply the size multiplier of 0. So 0 times, if you've had a flight speed of 20, technically meant your flight speed was 0. How that worked in practice was you could do a calculation, and you would never, it would take you for a long time to fly across the space. Some people had a problem with that. Well, they've clarified that it says most people's character speeds are recalculated. Well, in this case, your flight speed does not change. So if your size changes, you get bigger, you get smaller. Your flight speed does not. So when Wasp goes down to miniature 1-inch size, if her flight speed was 20, it's still 20. So that would be, a rules clarification on that. So that then some people will be really happy to know that. So they're like, oh, now my Wasp isn't spinning 4 turns to fly across one space, or whatever it would be. Another thing they touched on too was when you're growing into space, if you're getting bigger, if somebody is an object, or somebody is of average size or smaller, they're considered to still stay in the same space. You're basically kind of growing around them. But if they're bigger, they're considered to be pushed out of that space. So some things you'd want to consider are, like, if there's a semi truck or a large truck and Giant Man's growing, his foot or whatever, when he's getting larger, would push that out of that space. So tactically, that might make some differences in your game and how it plays out. So just some things with that, and how it affects things, space wise and whatnot. So hopefully that helped clarify some.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, it's really that's it for the changes. So, I mean, what's your hot take on this section in general?
I mean, just more stuff to play with.
Yeah.
Anytime you get new, powers, it's like, okay, the first thing I thought was like, okay, some of my personal builds, what do I got to go back and change? How can I make them better? How can I use this as a narrator in a game? So, it's, to me, it's exciting. I got to go back and reread even, because it's like you can't
Mm.
soak it all in at once. So,
Yeah, I mean, you think about some of the older challenges of this game, right? What was the first big challenge? Oh, a, a target number of 20 is too high to get out of
yeah.
webbing. It's like, all right, but what if you had something that was corrosive on your
Oh, yeah.
person? Or what if you had luck powers that you could really
Oh,
build
yeah.
up so the more tools we get to play with, some of those older challenges that seemed insurmountable maybe don't seem quite as tough
Yeah.
anymore. Yeah. And the other thing I think about is we're getting all of these great powers in an X-Men book.
Yeah.
However, these are going to be powers in the game for Spider-Man.
Yeah.
So you think about how can the Spider-Man book take advantage of these powers, and that opens things up. I think especially like you mentioned Craven, but just in general, I think some of those Spider-Man enemies might be able to take some, get some use out of those new elemental control powers.
Oh, yeah. I like even Scorpion. Like, we don't have a Scorpion build. We don't have an official Scorpion build. I mean,
Right.
kudos to all the community builders out there. I've probably seen at least two, maybe three different Scorpion builds. So keep doing it. But I mean, I think at one time, I mean, his tail shot energy, but I'm pretty certain there's been another time where it shot corrosive acid out of his
Yeah.
tail. So, that's just one version or one tweak of him. A Spider Slayer.
Mhm.
We don't have an official build. Spider Slayers, they have all sorts of weapons. So, toxin, chemical, I mean, anything's on the table. Who knows what they'll put in there, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's exciting to think about not only what are these powers going to do for the X-Men characters, but for all of the other expansions coming up in the future. So yeah, I mean, I think this section is great. I mean, I think for the luck and the healing powers alone, sell it to me. I'll be honest, I'm probably not going to use the translation powers. I mean, but I'm happy they're there. They kind of have to be there if you want to have Doug Ramsey. Maybe there's hey, if anyone out there has some creative ways to use these translation powers in a game for a villain, something like that. I'd love to hear it because I would want to get some use out of that. And of course, all of the precog powers, especially precog 1 to 4, I think open up a completely different kind of game where the narrator and the player really get to work a little more closely together to have some insights into what's to come, right? The
Yeah.
narrator isn't going to be as guarded or can't be as guarded in their secrets. So it just opens up maybe some more collaborative role playing there.
Oh man, I was just sitting here while you were talking, thinking of some of these precog powers would be really good in a detective type game, X Factor style or something.
Oh my gosh,
I
yeah.
mean, like, you could have so much fun with that.
Yeah, yeah, especially like the lower ones, not that the powers are gonna solve the mystery
No, 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 but
instantly,
lead you in
but
some directions that
yeah,
would be
even
just
like,
fun.
detect supers is just like a way of maybe just zeroing in on an enemy, perhaps intuition kind of hinting you in the right direction. Sometimes a
Yep.
mystery can be frustrating for characters, but if you've got a couple little hints along the way, it can just improve the
I
experience.
think doesn't Pip the Troll have some type of detect supers ability from a long distance or something? Maybe I'm way off, and his build doesn't exist. I mean,
Yeah,
an official build. Anyway, I'm getting way
right.
off topic on there. So I just excited. I'm excited about stuff, cool new stuff. So
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, it's great if you haven't picked up the X-Men expansion. I think it's worth it. This is just one example. It's one relatively small chapter in the grand scheme of things
yeah,
that provides just a ton of inspiration for so many different character builds that open up because of these new powers in the game. So yeah, definitely check it out. All right, Billy. Hey, as always, thanks for chatting with me. It's always more fun to do this with you than alone. Appreciate it.
thanks for the time.
All right, take care, everyone. Bye.